Morning, Tez Plavenex from SUP Mag UK here, and one of the things that I wanted to talk about is quivers of boards, quivers of stand-up paddle boards, and also paddles. You can see there's two paddles on the beach as well, which we'll get to in a second, but essentially as you get better at stand-up paddle boarding, you'd want to try and maximise what you've got, the conditions, and so the amount of time you get out on the water. You just want to maximise it as much as possible, and having a variety of different equipment to play around with will help you achieve that. Now, in stand-up paddleboarding, there are a lot of different routes you can follow. You could go down the racing route, you could be a touring paddler, you could be a whitewater paddler, you could be a surf supper, that kind of thing, and what we've got on the beach here is pretty much to the latter. So as much as you can sort of have any type of quiver, you know, there are multiples that you could choose in terms of your equipment based on your personal stand-up paddleboarding preferences. But here we've got some equipment. This quiver is particularly aimed in this instance at stand-up paddle surfing, so, but also a particular type of stand-up paddle surfer. You know, you again, within the realms of stand-up paddle surfing, you've got the performance shortboarder, you've got those who like it a little bit more mellow, you've got the longboarder. You know, okay, stand-up paddleboarding is still a fairly young sport and evolving, and we're not there yet in terms of what actually you know, the sport is concrete. There's still plenty of experimenting that we can go through and sort of take part in. In this instance, we've got, you know, the longboarder, or longboarder who dabbles with a little bit of performance surf sup in mind. So you'll see in the middle we've got the longer board, the longboard surf sup. This particular one from Hyper Hawaii, it's a 9'11". You can see it's got the length, obviously. There's a little bit of width on it to help, you know, if the conditions aren't particularly great, if they're not perfect, but you've got that pulled in tail, so you could do a little bit of nose riding if that's your preference, or if you fancied sort of throwing it around a little bit, then you've got a sort of nice performance tail on it to help you achieve that. So somebody would probably be using this for smaller swells, maybe up to head high, maybe a little bit bigger if they're confident, but ultimately they want to be out there sort of cruising around on swells, progressively sort of turning the board as opposed to rip, shred and tear, you know, and sort of just getting involved in some gliding carves, that kind of thing. Or maybe they'll wax the nose, get a few toes over, a few sole arches, that kind of thing. What you do have within stand-up paddleboarding is the sort of perceived to be the all-rounder, the 10-6. You know, traditionally that was the type of board that you would start on. You'd get out there, it would do you for flat water. This particular board will also do for flat water if you want a bit of flat water cruising as well. There's no question about that, it will work. But the all-rounder, the 10-6 all-rounder, traditionally was the board you started on and would help you progress into waves if you wanted to. Nowadays we're actually seeing a raft of these sort of longer boards that are actually more maneuver orientated, so not necessarily quite as long board as this, but at the same time not just a one-trick pony. They, you know, can still do the flat water, that's fine, but also if you want to progress into waves, for instance, then they'll give you, you know, the performance attributes that you need to head into the surf. So you could, you know, keep hold of your 10-6 if you wanted to as part of your quiver. You don't have to fork out yet again for another sort of longboard specific board, because I do appreciate that, you know, quivers of equipment, you know, are costly. It's obviously money. Not everybody wants to sort of spend that kind of cash and own multiple bits of equipment. But in this instance, just going back to this particular quiver, like I say, we've got a performance longboard surfer here in the shape of the Hyper Hawaii, and that's very much, you know, designed, as I said, to get out in the waves and sort of make use of, you know, the surf in terms of sort of mellow carves. You know, you can throw the tail if you've got the skills, but it's got that particular longboard style of riding in mind. Moving across to the left, you'll see the AHD Sea Lion wings. Very much a different kind of shape board, as you can see. It's got the very pronounced swallowtail on the back. It's much shorter at 7.6. It's got a lot more nose rocker on the front of it. And all in, it's also got twin fins. All in, it's a very different type of board. But actually, you know, there is synergy between the two shapes. You sort of, if you come from surfing, for instance, some longboarders are what you call sort of retro shape riders, and they tend to switch between these types of boards within surfing. So a longboard and then a fish style shape would sort of give you, you know, a different style of riding, a different feel of riding. And this is the same with stand-up paddleboarding as well. The AHD Sea Lion wings, you know, the fish shape, very much aimed at sort of quicker, more pivotal turns, still actually in the same kind of surf that you would take your longboard out in, you know, so not huge, but sort of up to around head high maybe. It's designed to be very fast. You can get it on a rail, but actually you can slash it around off the tail as well. Even though it's only really short, it's actually got quite a lot of glide to actually get you into the waves, just like the longboard. So like I say, the synergy is actually there between the two shapes, believe it or not. In this instance as well, the Sea Lion wings, just as an added bit of versatility, can actually take a foil. So that's a slightly different sort of style of paddleboarding. It's very new at the moment, not a lot of people doing it, but yeah, that particular one, it will take a foil, so give you even more versatility. So you could actually stop there if you wanted to. You know, that would do you quite happily across a wide variety of different conditions, sort of out in the surf. However, some surfers do tend to want to travel. And in that instance, we've also got, as you can see rolled up on the floor here, we've got an inflatable as well. Now, we've included an inflatable in this particular quiver because traveling with equipment, particularly on airlines, can be a little bit tricky. So, you know, you might be heading off on your hollybobs wherever to score some conditions, you know, in whatever part of the world you think, you know, might be good, and in that instance you might decide to plump for an inflatable. Now, inflatable technology's got so much better over the last few years, and while not quite on par with hardboards in terms of performance, you know, they're getting there, and you know, that would actually perfect, it would suffice, no problem, sort of out in the surf once you actually get to your destination. You know, so you could keep that just for those traveling sojourns. You know, it might not even be overseas, it might be where you just decide to head down the coast, but actually you're not in your van, for instance, you're in the family car and you haven't got much space, so you decide to chuck that in. It's all good. But like I say, those three particular boards would do you fine in the surf as a quiver. Now, like I say, not everybody has got the cash to stump up for all this equipment, and it is just an example of what you can do with boards. Now, you'll also notice that I've got two paddles on the floor as well. Now, both these paddles are quite different in terms of their feel. The one on the left there is very sort of stiff. It's not got as much flex, so it's very much about power from the off. Whereas the one on the right, the Werner, that's very soft flex and designed to be more flicky and sort of rail to rail movements, very easy. So in terms of paddle wraparounds, that kind of thing, that's probably the one that I'd stump up for if I was going to go out and sort of attempt to surf like that. So ideally I'd partner that particular paddle with the shorter board, whereas I'd partner the more powerful, stiffer shaft flex paddle with the longer board. You know, don't have to, obviously there's no rules, no right and wrongs, you can do whatever you want to do within the sport, but that's just my personal preferences. But having two paddles as well just allows you to switch up the feel, you know, along with your boards, switch up the feel of your riding. And again, like I say, as a complete quiver, you know, that would suit a sort of longboard retro style surfer down to the ground, to be honest. Doesn't have to be this. You could go multiples of shortboard, for instance, or you could go multiples of longboard. One other thing that you could do with this quiver, in fact, and something that I would prefer, is I'd also chuck in maybe a hybrid race board or touring board. And the reason for that is that I could get out there on sort of uber small days, if you like, and still pick up those glides and waves. I wouldn't necessarily be looking to turn or carve, not particularly hard anyway, but that would just give me another option for getting out in surf. Likewise, I could take it out in bigger surf. As many of us will know, you know, some races around the world are held in surf, so it's not a bad skill to have. So that would just be me. Again, yes, I appreciate that's yet another piece of equipment in the mix, so therefore it's cost. You don't have to go down that route, obviously, but that's just my personal preferences. But yeah, as an example of one particular kind of quiver for surf SUP, this is one that would suit, you know, down to the ground if you're looking to maximize the conditions that you've got. Could be anything else as well. You know, as riders, we should be looking to try and understand how we actually paddle, how we ride, and what our personal preferences are, and actually fit our quivers to our sort of main environments that we paddle in.